finally, a little alone time all to myself out in my garden. Ah.
Welcome to a tiny little magical kingdom called Bithaca. Oh, my begonias, there you are. We're so happy you came. All our adventures are for the young at heart. No matter what our age, this is our version of gnome gardening. Well, hey! Welcome back, y'all. It is awfully nice to see you again. To support my channel, subscribe and click the notification bell. YouTube will let you know when I release a new episode.
Oh, my begonias.
Blossom Stone Fairy lives at the base of the treehouse in the Minis area. She lives in a pink house with her husband Eridan, Ari for short, and their beautiful daughter Layla. These two just love to go on adventures together, but Blossom's not really the adventurous type. Blossom's more of the motherly type who just can't help but worry about everything, so she usually avoids adventures as she finds the unknown just too scary. But you simply don't know what you are capable of until you're in a situation of an unknown. One day, while enjoying a cup of mint tea, Blossom was resting upon her stone bridge and noticed that Whitley Ghost was playing tag with a new critter around the pond. Being a good neighbor, she strolled over to introduce herself. Whitley and Itty Bitty had been teleporting themselves all over Bithaca all morning. They had just jumped out of the pond water and onto dry land. Whitley was it, and he was almost close enough to tag Itty, who suddenly turned on him and headed back to the pond. The boys were so into their game that they never saw Blossom. Itty was so caught off guard when she stepped into his path that he was unable to avoid the collision between them. Poor Whitley tried to catch them, but then Itty lost control of his portal and off they went. Much to everyone's dismay, they had teleported into several places before tumbling out at the bottom of a waterfall within the human world.
Oh, my begonias.
Exclaimed a very soggy Blossom at this unexpected adventure as she fanned her wings to dry them. Wow, Whitley said, happy to return to the human world he had long forgotten. Itty Bitty, however, felt so sorry at what had happened. Both Blossom and Whitley could see how upset he was and that he was being far too hard upon himself. So Blossom walked over to Edie and said,
Listen, sugar, this is just a clear case of not paying attention to what we were doing. So an accident was bound to happen. We're all to blame here, so don't go putting so much weight upon your shoulders, all right?
Blossom said. Edie cheered up at this. Blossom suggested that one of them open a portal to go home. But at this time, Edie was unable to open a stable portal, and Blossom couldn't open a portal without a mushroom. As they had left Bithaca, the three were now the size of a 6-year-old human child. Blossom saw the worried looks upon the boys' faces, reaches in her pockets for her magic dust, and walks over to the boys. She sprinkles powder upon each boy to keep them the size of a Bithacan. Even though she doesn't like adventures much, Blossom really didn't want the boys to have a bad experience, so she decided to inform them all hope is not lost.
Listen, sugars, all we need to do is find some mushrooms and I can open up my portal.
Blossom said to two very excited little boys. You see, even though they were worried about getting home, they really wanted to go explore the human world. Being the motherly type, Blossom understood and said,
Darlings, as we're already here, why don't we just go and explore?
Two of the cutest faces in Bithaca agreed excitedly and began to dance around.
Now hold on there, sweeties. We must first make sure it's safe to be here. It may seem harmless enough, but we must be careful.
She continued to say. Blossom checked the cave, and they seemed safe enough behind the waterfall,
Well now,
she said as she returned to the boys.
all field trips involve an exploration of some sort, so we may as well go and explore this cave to find out if it's a future safe portal or not. Since we are hidden behind the waterfall, we should be safe in here.
Inside the cave was damp and cool, and Blossom and the boys began to explore while climbing over rocks and ledges. Even though Whitley and Blossom could fly, they stayed right beside Eddie. They had just climbed up to the next level in the cave and found a cluster of large cave mushrooms, and that's when everyone realized how hungry they were. 3 growling tummies made the tiny group burst out laughing.
Well then, I guess I should start cooking.
Blossom said.
Cooking? Cooking what?
Both boys asked in unison. Blossom laughed at their cuteness.
How do you boys feel about a nice hot bowl of wild mushroom soup?
Blossom asked, pointing to the mushrooms, and was met with very loud tummy growls that echoed within the cave. And laughter escaped from everyone. At this point, Blossom began to think of all the things she would need to cook with.
Okay, boys, we will need to go outside to find the items that I will need to cook with. But first, I need to go check and see if it's safe enough for us to go outside. And I will need you boys to stay here while I go see.
The boys watched in excitement as Blossom flew over to the waterfall. Even though they were excited at their adventure, they were a little nervous at all the unknown. Blossom slowly peeks through the waterfall. She searches for any movement or anything that might harm them. As she didn't see anything, she flew back to the boys to let them outside.
Now then, we need a small pile of the same size rocks. You boys go look around for them while I go find firewood, bowls, and some things to cook in. Okay?
Blossom asked the boys. They all set out to find the necessary items that Blossom wanted. As the boys were looking for rocks, they began to notice some strange eyeballs floating up in the trees. As Whitley could fly, he curiously flew up to see what they belonged to. Well, it turned out to be an every critter for himself moment. You see, those eyes just so happened to belong to a very large mosquito, who headed for the boys and began to chase after them. The boys headed for the bushes and to get out of his path. Miss Blossom, help! Well now, all the hollering the boys were doing out of fear riled up Blossom's mama instincts. That crazy critter never stood a chance. Blossom flew up and grabbed a thick vine along the way. She quickly made a lasso and threw it up and over the mosquito's head. When it slid down the mosquito's throat, she pulled tight. Instinctively, that mosquito headed skyward at a very fast pace, bucking all the way as it tried to remove Blossom from its back. But Blossom stubbornly refused to be dislodged because her mommy instincts were far stronger than that mosquito could have ever imagined.
Oh, no, you don't. Not on my watch.
Blossom said. As terrified as she was just as equally determined to save the boys, so nothing it did made her let go. The boys watched in awe from the safety of the bushes as Blossom kicked up her heels as the mosquito looked for all it was worth like a bucking bronco. Eddie had never seen a lady like her in his whole life. He was so impressed by Blossom's ability to match the mosquito's craziness. That mean old critter thought it could get rid of Blossom by flying between two extremely close branches. But Blossom was on to his trick and at the very last moment flew up and off of it. Everyone couldn't help but laugh as the critter went and got himself stuck in his own trap.
Wow.
Both boys let out a uniform admiration for Blossom as she flew back to them.
Come along, sweeties.
Blossom said as she ushered them back behind the waterfall for safety. Once inside, they began to search for something that they could cook the mushroom soup in. As they walked, the cave echoed sounds. After a while, over in a corner, they found a rock with a hole in it, deep enough to hold soup.
Why, youngins, this'll make a great pot.
Blossom said as she and the boys began to roll it towards the entrance of the cave.
When I was a-showing that mosquito a thing or two, I saw a mound of halite that we can use to salt our soup with. Now, you boys let me go and see if that crazy critter has gone or not.
Blossom told the boys and went to peek outside. Blossom peeked outside and watched as the mosquito tried to free itself. Finally, it succeeded, and once it flew away, Blossom returned to retrieve the boys. Once outside, Blossom had asked the boys to put the same size rocks they had gathered into a circle, then asked them to gather some twigs to start a fire so she could cook. And Blossom set out to get the halite. Now that that was done, they needed to head back to the cave to get the mushrooms and the pot to cook them in. Blossom and Itty Bitty rolled the pot out of the cave and over to the circle to cook the soup. Blossom then started a fire in the circle. She and Itty Bitty then set the pot upright into the circle. Then Blossom and the boys had used acorn tops to haul the water from the waterfall to the pot. In went the halite, the cave mushrooms, some cattail root, and some flower seeds that she had in her pocket. The aroma was making it very hard to wait to eat.
Mm-mm. Finally, we can eat.
Blossom said to two very hungry boys. In case you was wondering how Whitley can eat as he's a ghost, well, he's been in Bithaca long enough that the magic has rubbed off on him, and even though he can't hold anything, he sure can chow down. It's just a matter of time before Whitley can hold things. You just wait and see. Everyone was getting sleepy, as it had been quite the adventurous day.
Well, my sweeties, our little adventure must come to an end. We should get home. My family will begin to wonder what's become of me.
Blossom said to the boys.
Aww,
Could we stay longer? They asked hopefully.
I tell you what, my Ari and Layla just love adventuring, and I will surely tell them all about our adventure and the mushrooms that we found, and if they would be so kind as to take you boys along with them. What say you?
Oh, yes, please, the boys chimed in unison.
Well then, let's put out the fire and clean up the place before we head on home.
Blossom asked. Edie kicked dirt onto the fire to smother it. They emptied and cleaned the pot and then rolled it back to the cave where they found it. Then everyone found mushrooms so that Fairy Blossom could open a fairy circle and a portal to home. Blossom once again took out her magic powder and blew it on everyone. They could see the treehouse in her portal doorway And then suddenly they were home.
Awesome!
The boys chimed in unison as usual.
Oh, thank you, boys, for a wonderful adventure. Why, I never even knew I could ride a bronco mosquito.
Everyone bust out laughing. Blossom waves goodbye to the boys and heads on home. Her family had missed her dearly and wished to hear all about her adventures. Naturally, father and daughter started planning their own future adventure, while Blossom was perfectly content with the tranquility of her own home. Even though she enjoyed the company of the boys, Blossom hoped it would be a long time before she went on another adventure. It was sure nice spending some time with you. Y'all come on back for our next adventure. We'd love to see you. Until we meet again, be kind to one another. Bye now.
We sure do thank you all for tapping those buttons. Like, subscribe, and share.
May the magic of wonder always fill your heart.